I feel that we can't manage without someone else's help, my wife said, finally calmed down after another argument. What are you talking about? Let's go to my mom. Your mom? A practicing psychologist? I thought this would end sooner or later. With what? With you calling your mom Helen for help. But you know she's quite successful in her field. She's got a lot of good references. I was okay with that. But don't you think she'll subconsciously take your side when she's dealing with our situation? I don't think so. Either way, we won't know until we try. What other suggestions do you have? Go to a paid counselor, or Ashley stopped talking. Or what? Or get a divorce so we don't torture each other. All right. Huh? Let's go see Helen. After a pause, I answered. I didn't want to divorce my young wife. She was smart and beautiful, and we had many hobbies together. But sometimes she behaved so obnoxiously that I wanted to not only divorce her, but even punch her in the face. Of course, it was only a second wave of rage, because in 2 years of our relationship, I had never laid a finger on her. Unless you counted the slaps on the ass during nighttime activities, but that was different. Now we needed to talk to her mother, who is a very successful person in her field. Judging by the testimonials, she has already helped many couples avoid divorce and has helped many people sort out their psychological problems. After speaking with her on the phone, we decided that my wife and I would benefit from a one-on-one conversation with her to present our views on the matter in a sincere and unbiased manner. Our initial mistake was in confiding in Ashley first. She had a long 4-hour conversation with her mother, and I realized it wasn't very productive. My wife could have influenced my mother-in-law to view me not as a family member or even a client, but as someone with a tarnished reputation. Nevertheless, my mother-in-law showed true professionalism. When I arrived at her place in the evening, intentionally splitting our visits with my wife, she greeted me with a warm hug and a smile. I immediately caught the scent of her fine and pleasant perfume, and the aroma of freshly baked goods wafted through the air. Nevertheless, my mother-in-law gave me a warm welcome that belied my initial fears. She was impeccably dressed, a black skirt that fell gracefully above her knees, paired with a classic white shirt. The shirt was slightly unbuttoned, revealing her lush breasts, a sight that had eluded me during our infrequent encounters. Lovingly serving me cakes and mint tea, she created a welcoming atmosphere in which I felt at ease. Only 2 aspects continued to disturb me: her alluring appearance and the true purpose of my visit. So, Alexander, shall we continue our conversation? She suggested. Of course, I replied, once again feeling slightly disoriented. I had originally envisioned our conversation taking place in the kitchen, but my mother-in-law had other intentions. Instead, we settled on opposite ends of the same couch in the living room, positioned at a slight angle to each other. In retrospect, as a professional psychologist, she was aiming for an environment of maximum openness and transparency, devoid of any barriers or objects that might interfere with our conversation. Helen, however, seemed to have perfected this notion by blurring the lines between openness and intimacy. As she crossed one of her slender legs over the other, a flurry of thoughts raced through my mind. Suddenly, I felt like I was not in a psychologist's office or my mother-in-law's house, but on a date with an attractive and naturally sensual, mature aunt. "Let's talk, Alexander," Ashley said. From her words, I captured the essence of the problems in your situation, but realized that her perspective was subjective. In order to effectively help you, I need a second point of view. So, what aspects of your life together are causing you dissatisfaction? At first, I was reserved and answered briefly, struggling to articulate my thoughts. However, as I watched my mother-in-law's calm response and open-mindedness, I began to relax and the words flowed out of me. I shared a wealth of information and views, some of which were not well received by Helen as they directly affected her daughter. Despite this, she listened patiently, nodding in agreement several times. It seemed as if my narrative would never end, and my claims were endless. I told my mother-in-law about domestic affairs, expressed my grievances against my wife, and emphasized her negative qualities. As I recounted my long narrative, it seemed to me that I was describing my relationship with a monstrous creature whom, against all odds, I loved for some inexplicable reason. She listened to me attentively, swaying her slender bare feet casually. It distracted me a lot, as I had always been a fan of that particular feature of the female body. Finally, she spoke, bringing me to an indescribable delight as I was in desperate need of a break. "Alexander, well, what can I say?" she began. "The first thing that comes to mind is that your and Ashley's problems are 99% identical to those faced by all married couples, without exception. So, you shouldn't think that your situation is overly complicated or unique. It can be broken down into various parts and components. The main problem is the lack of open communication and the tendency to keep most thoughts and feelings to oneself. Why resort to self-destructive behavior when open discussion of problems can lead to solutions? It's important to communicate effectively and address underlying issues. Even if Ashley tends to get defensive during these conversations, she needs to work on this aspect of her character. There are different aspects here, and we need to look at them all together as a group of three and individually. In Ashley's absence, let's look at the intimate aspects of your relationship. Although I thought there were no issues in this area, something seems to be bothering Ashley. She mentions that you can be too pushy and insatiable. Let's discuss this further. Did Ashley really say that? Did she say that to her own mother? Why are you surprised? Ashley and I have always been open with each other. You'd be surprised, but before we were married, I knew you had good qualities. Wow. I hope they were good qualities. Yes, Sash. In fact, let me tell you that when I first met you and learned more about you, I truly admired you. Helen, you're embarrassing me. What's wrong with that? You're attractive, well-built, and, from what Ashley tells me, skillful and powerful in bed. Helen, I appreciate the compliments, but I'm not comfortable discussing these things with you as a mother-in-law and not as a psychologist. Well, what can you do, son-in-law? If you want to understand a problem, you have to face it head-on. So what's the problem? You could be a little open about it. Maybe try suggesting to Ashley that you have intimacy every other day instead of every day. Okay, Helen, let's be honest with each other. I'm not happy with what Ashley and I have right now. I want to do it more than once a day. And you're suggesting we do it even less often? Sure, it's not the most important aspect of a family relationship, but you're wrong. It's very important. Personally, I've always dreamed of a man like you. My mother-in-law's legs shook even more before my eyes. Someone like me? Yeah, let's not make me say nice things about you anymore. Have you ever thought about being unfaithful to your wife? Have you ever thought about cheating on Ashley? I have, but I haven't. You can trust me, and I promise not to tell her about it. I want to make it clear that I'm not lying or implying that I've come close many times, but something always got in my way at the last minute. I think I was afraid the infidelity would reveal itself. So, you're looking for a reliable man to fulfill your needs. Is that correct? Apparently, yes. After my answer, my mother-in-law moved closer to me and whispered, "I'm good at keeping secrets." "And you know how to keep them." She turned her face toward mine, at which point I couldn't help myself. "We'll have to find out." With those words, I kissed her, savoring the delicious softness of her lips. Half an hour later, as we were lying on the couch, my mother-in-law remarked, "Your wife's situation is complicated and requires regular visits with a professional counselor. I am ready to come to you as early as tomorrow." I cheerfully replied,